Okay, I think we're about get ready to start. Just about one more minute, I think. Or we can start now. Okay, all right. So thank you everybody for joining our session today. I know it was a long weekend and it's also a Sunday, so give yourself a round for showing up here. Yeah. Awesome. Also to our online audiences, I know you're out there, I can't see you, but thank you also for joining. And we will get started. So today we will be talking about how to get to university in America, specifically for the US. I know we have some interest in England. I'll try to incorporate some of that into our presentation here today. But we will be talking through, at a high level, the roadmap to university, right? And then more specifically talking about personal statements and the SAT. And so just to get started, sorry. Oh, whoops. Gotta turn on the clicker first, it's the first step. All right, my name is John Fujita, or you can call me Yuki, which is my Japanese name. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you. And I'm Japanese American. I went to UCLA and studied English and minored in film and television studies. And I've worked in various industries in the film industry in Los Angeles. I've also worked in advertising before I finally came to Asia to be an education consultant and be a mentor to students just like yourselves, get into their dream colleges, their best fit universities, right? And hopefully equip you with the tools and skills necessary to be successful, not just in university, but university and beyond into your career, right? And this is our admissions consulting team. You'll be hearing from Jay Bills later, where we'll talk about how do you get into the Ivy Leagues. But I'm very proud of our strong team here. Collectively, we have over decades of experience helping students get into their universities, mentoring them, and we just really love to work with students and help them discover their strengths and their passions and get them prepared for university and beyond. And I will pass it to Ms. Kristin to talk about herself.
Hello, my name is Kristin. I'm the head of the test prep department at Point Avenue. I graduated from La Sorbonne in Paris with my master's in comparative literature, and I've been teaching for 8 years, about 8 or 9 years. I've been teaching test prep for the past 4 years. So it's been really fun coming to Point Avenue to work with the students, especially on their English tests, as that's my specialty. But we do have our entire team of these lovely people here. So we have Mr. Evan, who is also a IELTS and TOEFL expert, and Mr. Joe and Miss Alice, who are our SAT experts. So they're both actually teaching a class right now for our SAT students for the summer term, but also really proud of this group of people and what we have done to create an exciting and engaging curriculum for test prep, because often studying for SAT or any kind of test might feel quite boring. We've tried our best to make our curriculum engaging and interactive for students.
Awesome. Thank you, Kristin. All right, struggling with the clicker a little bit. Okay, so just a little bit of background about Point Avenue. I started at Point Avenue in 2018, so 4 years ago. I can't believe it. It's been 4 years. Where we started in Hanoi, Vietnam. That's where we're headquartered before we expanded into a second center in Long Bien, Hanoi, which is in the suburbs of Hanoi. And then we came to Bangkok, Thailand, just about a year and a half ago. And, we've had, I came here to lead the admissions consulting department, and I've been really proud of the success that we've had so far. I've worked with students where we've got them into MIT, Harvard, Northwestern, and other top universities. And I think we're just getting better at it every single day. So today we're here to talk about the university application checklist for the US, right? Just as a rundown of the agenda, I'm going to talk about the roadmap to university at a high level, right? And then talk about it a little bit more specifically for you, grade 11, grade 12 students who are getting really close to the application cycle or almost already there, right? And then I'll be having a workshop on the personal statement itself, which is the primary essay that you apply to university with. And everyone should have received a black bag with some packets of papers in there. One packet is a little cheat book for you to see what you will have to do for the university application. The other one is specifically for the personal statement, and we're going to do some work together here today. And then after that, Ms. Kristin here will take the students to a room to do some SAT exercises, right? Or to have a demo class. You're going to play Jeopardy, I believe?
Yeah, we're actually going to review some SAT material and then play a Jeopardy game.
Yes.
To do a little practice.
And then while that's happening, the parents will remain, and I will be having a conversation with Mr. J. Bills, who earned his master's at Harvard, to talk more specifically about who gets in and who doesn't get in to these top universities. And then at the last portion, we'll have a Q&A portion. Okay, so just at a high level, I want to talk about what does it look like to get to university, right? Whether you're aiming for the US or you're going to the UK, or maybe you don't know yet, right? This is really important to consider, right? Actually, how many of us here today are in grade 9? Oh, grade 9, awesome, one person, great. Congratulations to you for planning early. Grade 10? Grade 11? Grade 12? All right, okay. So we got a good spread, right? So this will be good information for you, right? So for my grade 9, right, it's really important. So hold on. When we talk about university applications, colleges consider these 4 areas of your profile, right? When you apply to university, these are the 4 things they consider. Your academic courses, right? So that's not just your GPA, but also what classes you take and how difficult they are, right? And then your testing, of course, right? Your SAT, ACT, TOEFL, IELTS, right? Which Ms. Kristin will talk about a little bit more. And then your extracurricular activities, right? So these are the clubs that you're involved in, the volunteering that you do, the independent projects that you execute, right? All these different kinds of things that you do outside of the classroom, right? And then finally, what do you do during your summer, right? Because although summer is a time off and that's time for you to rest and relax and have fun, it should also be a time for you to be being productive, right? Doing something productive and beneficial for your community and for yourself, right? And so primarily we're here to talk about personal statement, which kind of encompasses more of the extracurricular activities and standardized testing, right? I'm going to talk a lot more about academics in a second, because while it is really important, the one thing I want everyone to keep in mind is that when you're aiming for these really, really top universities, your academics are going to be very important, but it's only one piece of the puzzle, and that's only one piece to get you considered for a school in the Ivy Leagues or top 20 or whatever it might be. And so I want to show this chart. This chart is from the NACAC, which stands for the National Association of College Admissions Counselors. And so this is a survey, an annual survey that is taken amongst all different admissions officers across all different colleges. And they tell us what importance these application factors they have. So just from left to right, you can see the factor, right? So what are the different factors of a student's profile? This N is a sample size, so how many people were asked in the survey. And then from most important to least important, right? And so what I want to point out here is that today we're here to talk about these 2 things, admissions test scores and essay writing. And what I just want to point out here is the top part you can see, right? That grades, the courses that you take, the strength of your curriculum, and your test scores rank as considerable importance, right? Now, I don't want that to fool you to think that that's the only thing that matters for universities. It's the thing that will get you considered for a university like Harvard, right? But once you reach a certain threshold of good grades and good test scores, then all these other things are going to matter a lot more. So you can see right under test scores is essays at 23.2 right here, right? And I'll show it more, but you can see that all these other factors are also of moderate importance, meaning that they hold a lot of weight once you're past a certain threshold, right? I'm going to talk more about that throughout the presentation, but what I want everyone to understand here today is that grades and test scores are a very, very important piece, but it's only one piece of the puzzle, right? And I'm going to explain more. And Right here, though, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Kristin to talk a little bit about the standardized testing.
Right. So there's generally two important standardized tests for students to take when they're applying for university as an international student, and that is your SAT, but also your English proficiency exam. So if you're going to the United States, it's likely that you're going to take the TOEFL test. But if you're interested in the UK or maybe Australia, other countries like that, you might take the IELTS. So both the TOEFL and IELTS are English proficiency tests that we usually try to take a bit earlier, since generally it's easier to get a higher score on these tests. Most students here, I imagine, are pretty fluent in English, especially if you're attending international high school. So generally, we take the English test first and get it out of the way, and then focus later on, grade 10, grade 11, on our SAT, which is a pretty difficult exam. It's also very specific to the United States. So if you're going to the UK, maybe do not need SAT.
Yeah, and one thing I just want to point out, right, is the reason why we recommend taking it here is because if you're in 9th grade, for the summer, if you want to be doing a summer program in the US, many times they will ask for a TOEFL test or some kind of English proficiency test, right? And then the other thing I just want to point out here is that, you know, if you're younger, right, grade 9, grade 10, right, we really recommend that students get a head start on the SAT, because the last thing you want is that you're trying to cram for the SAT while you're taking the hardest classes of your high school career, and you're also applying to college, and you're going to be super busy and you're going to be stressed out, right? So the earlier you can get a start, the better.
So that leads into how long does it take to sort of improve an SAT score? So it might take a lot longer than you expect. So that's why it's important. We have a general chart here. Of course, this does depend on a few different things. But if you imagine that you have an SAT score right now, let's say it's lower than you want it to be, studying for 10 hours, you're probably just going to maintain that score. We need to at least study 20, 30, 40 hours of actual study time to start increasing our score. This is going to depend on a few different things, though. One of the big things is which area of the SAT is most difficult for you. Generally speaking, the hardest section for students to increase is their reading score. The reading on the SAT can be quite challenging, especially for international students, especially because a lot of the reading is very United States specific. There's sort of cultural references, historical documents that you might not be familiar with. So it's something that we do incorporate into our classes, is actually talking about the culture that goes along with the SAT. The math section is generally easiest to increase your score, as math, of course, is the most universal thing that's on the test. So generally, students have a higher math score to start with, and then we work on increasing the writing and reading score. Going down to the next chart, so going along with how long does it take to increase your score is going to be when can you take the test. The SAT is only delivered on very specific dates throughout the year. So here we have the test dates for the rest of 2022 into 2023, and the registration deadline, which is usually about a month before the test. However, I would like to encourage everyone to, while we consider the deadline, actually register even earlier, if possible. Actually, this August 27th test got fully booked in Bangkok already, like before the 29th. So it's quite important that we register early and then spend our time up until the test date preparing as much as we can. So, sorry, to go back a tiny bit to the preparation, it's actually, I always encourage students to read as much as they can on their own, especially since the reading section is the most difficult. Also to do some daily, if possible, daily vocabulary practice. And then, of course, to maybe join a course, a preparation course of some sort to prepare you for the test. But back to this timeline, we have the date and the registration. Something we might mention briefly later on is that the SAT is changing. So for the rest of this year, it's going to be the normal SAT that we have known and loved, which is on paper. Students must go to a test center and take the test on paper. But starting in 2023, it's becoming an online test. Actually, the test is going to be a lot shorter and easier. So we're looking forward to those changes. I'm sure students are as well.
Yeah, and I just want to mention, sometimes people wonder, how many times should I take the SAT, right? And we recommend no more than 3 times, because if you're really taking it more than 3 times, I think it's time to reconsider your studying strategy, right? Or if you're reaching your plateau, and you could probably be spending your time doing something more productive than just studying for a test, right? Because it takes a lot of time and effort to study for the SAT. That's why it's really important that you think ahead of it, right? You think ahead, take a diagnostic test with us, find out your baseline score, and then we can think about what is your goal score and how much time it's going to take to reach that, right? And for you applying this year or next year, right, it's really important to consider, right, when are the SAT test dates and how does it align with your application deadlines, right? And so I'm not going to dive too deep into this, but in general, in America, there are 2 application deadlines. There's an early round and there is the regular round. And for the early round, you must take that test earlier, right? This August one or this October one. And then if you take the December one, it's not going to count, right? And so this is your last chance, really, if you're applying this year and you're trying to apply by January, right? Now, for you, if you're in grade 11, right, then it's really important that you're thinking ahead, right? Because you can start preparing now and try to knock out that test earlier, right? And be done with it. Be done with it early, and then you can spend all of your time focusing on your classes and your really cool extracurricular activities and making a really awesome application, right? And so I'll go to the next slide.
So this slide is about the same information. How long will it take to increase our test score? This time for the TOEFL and the IELTS. So you might notice it looks a little bit faster. As I mentioned, generally scoring higher on the English proficiency exam is a bit easier. So usually it's a bit easier, a bit faster to increase our score for these tests. But it does depend. It does depend how much time per week are you dedicating to working on this material. Are you reading independently? Again, are you doing daily vocabulary practice? Same for the TOEFL and IELTS. The reading section tends to be the most difficult section for students. So this is, again, why we really harp on reading a lot on your own, whether it's novels, whether it's scientific information, but do as much reading as you can in your own time, just to help your comprehension skills when it comes to these tests. For the TOEFL and IELTS, I highly recommend joining a course. This is because these tests have a very specific structure. And so oftentimes students might take our diagnostic test. They find that especially their speaking and their writing score is a lot lower than they thought it was going to be. And it's not because they can't write or they can't speak. It's because they're unaware of the format the test wants you to answer in. So in our classes, of course, we're going to teach that format and we're going to practice that format so students have it perfect by the time they go take the test. So oftentimes they're very capable of writing an essay, of speaking in response to a question, but they need to learn the exact structure that the test is asking for. So that is for TOEFL and IELTS. TOEFL is scored on a point scale of 120. Generally, students are aiming for over 100, if possible, over 110. And I do want to say that score is very possible. We have had multiple students from Point Avenue achieve 110 plus on their TOEFL. For the IELTS, it's a band scale. It's a bit different. So the highest score on IELTS is 9, band 9, and that would mean that you are a fluent, almost like a native speaker. Most universities are looking for like a band 7, around a band 7. Again, it's a very possible thing to achieve, so it's not to be frightened, but it does require learning about the test, specifically what the test is going to ask you.
Yeah, I think one thing I would add to all these is that, test taking is very much a skill, right? And so it takes someone to help you, coach you through what you need to do on the test. And then also the practice to improve those test taking skills. And much like playing an instrument or learning some other skill, it takes time. And so it's really important that you're considering planning ahead as much as possible instead of waiting until the last moment, because that is a recipe for disaster. Okay. All right, next slide. All right, so now we're going to talk about the university application checklist. I'm just going to click through this. Now, everyone in your packet, in your cheat book, right, should have this checklist in here. So you should be able to see that there's a lot of stuff that you have to do for your U.S. university application, right? And the one thing I just want to point out to everyone is that it is a lot of stuff to get through. There's a huge list here. There's a list in your packet, right? Even for UK schools, right, it's going to be a little bit shorter, but there's still going to be a lot of things that you have to plan for ahead of time, right? And so if you're grade 12, and I can't emphasize to you enough how important it is that you start now, because your first deadline is going to be November 1st, and then your final deadlines are going to be in January. And you might think, well, that's about like 3-4 months from now. But the students I'm working with, the students working here at Point Avenue, we've already started months ago, right? And we've already made multiple drafts of essays. We've been spending this time doing school research. We've been spending the time planning out your testing roadmap. We've been spending time reviewing your profile and seeing what's strong about it and how to best present yourself, right? And so the point that I just want to make is that for grade 12, get started now, because if you wait until later, your life is going to be that much more stressful, right? And you're going to have that. You're not going to be happy with your application, right? And ultimately, when you're applying for university, you're only going to do it once, and you really want to give it all of your effort and be proud of what you're presenting, right? Okay, so now I'm going to get into the personal statement itself, right? The personal statement is the primary essay that you're going to be writing for your university applications. And for the UK, you will also have a personal statement. It's going to be slightly different, but the principles I'm going to talk about here are still going to apply to you, right? And so before I dive into the personal statement itself, I just want to talk about this chart again, right? Because one thing that I see a lot with my students is that they're very, very, very concerned about this stuff up here, your grades and your SAT score, which you should be. You should be very concerned about those things, because if you're trying to get into a great university, then you're going to need a strong GPA, and you're going to need really strong test scores, right? But what I want you to think about is that everyone applying to these universities is going to have really strong GPA, really strong test scores, right? And so what is the difference maker then, right? And you can see here, right, once we get past the essays, that of moderate importance are your recommendation letters. So what do your teachers think about you as a person, right? Your extracurricular activities actually has the highest moderate importance out of everything on this list right here. And then your work experience, right? And you might be wondering, well, if I'm going to talk about personal statements, why am I talking about this other stuff? And that's because all this other stuff is what makes up what you're going to be writing about in your essays, right? And so what I see with a lot of students is that taking a lot of extra classes and tutoring for your classes, and that's great because you need great test scores, or great test scores and GPA, but once you're past a certain threshold of GPA and test scores, in fact, what colleges do is that they will take your application, your transcripts, and feed it through a machine, piece of software that calculates your test scores and your transcripts and your grades, and it's going to pump out something called an academic index, which is a numerical score that basically says, are you ready for this university or not? And so if you're above a certain score for that university, then you're going to be considered, right? But if you fall below that, then you probably won't be considered for that university, right? And there's going to be a lot of strong applicants. So the question becomes, well, once everyone has proven their academic capabilities, what else matters, right? All these other things matter, right? And then not only this, but how do you talk about these things, right? Because I'm going to get into it, but it's not just about the fact that you did things, but how you talk about it, what you think about it, all these different kinds of things, right? And then, so yeah, essay right here, right? You can see right here. And one thing I just want to touch on, I'm not talking about interviews today, but it's something I always get a question on, which is, what about interviews for Harvard or Columbia or UPenn or whatever, right? And one thing I just want to say is that a lot of times students freak out about this, but it's not something to be worried about. A lot of these universities don't even require an interview to be part of the application process. And you can see, in fact, here, if you look here, a lot of people say it's of no importance almost, right? And what I've actually seen in my experience is that if you're getting an interview for a university, it's not necessarily a good sign. They want to have an interview with you because they want to verify something, right? And so basically, I want to point this out to you because you're worrying about the wrong thing, right? You need to worry about all these other things over here, right? For you in the UK, right, unless you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, you won't have an interview, right? But if you're applying to Oxford or Cambridge, you're actually going to have a really, really, really challenging interview, right? Where they're going to test your knowledge on whatever you want to study, right? So that's just something to be aware of. Okay. All right, so what is a personal statement, right? Can someone tell me what is a personal statement? Don't jump up all at once, you know. How about you, Rose? Do you know what a personal statement is? Just give it your best shot.
Is it like all the things you've done over the past few years?
All right, all the things you've done over the past few years. That's a good guess. Anyone else want to give a guess? How about you, my man? All right.
I think it's just basically explaining who you are.
Basically explaining who you are. Right. So that's a good answer. Explaining who you are, right? And everything you've done, that's also a good answer, right? But I'm going to actually tell you what isn't a personal statement, right? And a personal statement actually isn't everything you've done. It can be about some of the things you've done, but what I want to make clear to everyone is that a personal statement is not just a list of everything you've done, right? In your application itself, you will have an activities list. Sometimes schools will let you upload a resume into your application itself, right? You'll also have a section for your honors, right? And so it's not just about, here's all the cool stuff I've done. They already know about that, right? And so it's actually more about who you are, right? And what does that entail, right? What does who you are entail, right? And so what is a personal statement? And so a personal statement really is a story about who you are as a person, right? And it can be about something you've done before, right? Or it can be, you know, something on your activities list, but it doesn't have to be either, right? And really what you're trying to do through your essay is reveal who you are as a human being, right? So what I want you to think about is that when you submit your application, they're going to know all your activities. They're going to know your test scores. They're going to know your GPA, all the statistical things about you, who you are in your profile. They'll have that information already, right? And so through your essay, you are trying to reveal something else about you that can't just be told through a simple number or a test score, right? And so here are some of the things that we're talking about, right? Well, especially when we're talking about really competitive colleges, right? They want to be able to see that through your essay that you can be self-reflective, right? That you can think critically about the experiences that you've had, right? This goes back to not just doing certain extracurricular activities, but thinking about why am I doing it, right? Why is it important? Why am I there, right? And also being self-aware about who you are as a person, right? So a lot of times students fall into this trap of thinking about, well, my personal statement should just be about how awesome I am, how smart I am, how intelligent, how hardworking I am, right? And it can include some of those things, right? But colleges also want to see that you're someone who can be self-aware about what you're weak in, right? And how do you overcome that? Or how do you use that to your advantage in some way, right? And then, you know, along with that, it's, you know, being vulnerable and humble through your essay, right? I think it's part of being self-aware, right? Being honest with, you know, who you are as a person, what your shortcomings are, but also how you're choosing to overcome those things, right? Or maybe not overcoming those things. Sometimes, you know, the stories of our failures are much more impactful than the stories of our successes, right? And then finally, right, you're going to college, right? You're going to university. You're going to the next step of your educational journey. And colleges want to know that you're capable of learning and growth through your essay, right? If your essay is all about just how awesome I am, how smart I am, how hardworking I am, then why do you need to go to college, right? This is about, that you can have an experience and you can grow from that experience, right? And then moving into the future, right? How is that going to affect your, perspective and your outlook on life and the way you behave in it, right? Okay. And so what isn't a personal statement? Just a quick review, right? It's not about impressing the reader on the other end of the person reading your essay at the college, right? The one thing you have to remember is that these admissions officers are people. They're humans, right? And so if you're not engaging them on a human, then they're not going to care about what you have to say necessarily, right? If you're just, I'm sure we all know that one person in our life who just brags about how cool they are all the time, right? And you're like, I do not want to be around you anymore, right? You're not a good friend. Get away from me, right? That's not what it's about, right? And also, right, again, it's not just a list of the things you've done, right? It's more about how do you interpret things? What is your perspective on life? How do you behave in the world? How do you engage with it, right? And so this is the trap that a lot of students fall into also, which is that they just talk about what they did, but they don't talk about why they did it in the first place, right? Or why it's important, or what implication it has outside of just whatever that specific thing was, right? I have students who write about baking cakes, or students who write about driving their motorbike through a city, or we'll see when we analyze an essay, but one student who really hates to wear dresses, right? And we get to see more into the interior of that person. Okay, so just a quick summary, right? What it is, sorry, okay, yeah, here we go. So what it is that it is something self-reflective, right? Self-aware, you're vulnerable and humble, and demonstrates that you can learn and grow. And what it isn't is just an impressive list of stuff, right? Okay. So why is all this important? The reason why I'm emphasizing this so much right now is because, again, once you get to that top level of universities, top 20 universities, whatever it is, just think about it, right? You probably have a lot of friends who also have really awesome grades, really awesome test scores, right? And then they have to think about, well, what makes you different from all those other students who are also really, really intelligent, right? And so through your essays, that's how you do it, right? You have to show who you are beyond your test scores and your grades, right? You're showing how you think about the world, right? You're showing, right, your ability to write and communicate and be ready for college, right? And you're also showing your ability to be humble and self-aware, grow and learn, right? All these things are really important for a university. And then, of course, we all know COVID, right? It's been a huge bummer to everyone, right? I had a lot of plans. A lot of them are canceled. I'm sure everyone can relate. And you can see, right? This is changing a little bit now because this article is a little bit old, so SATs are coming back in to be considered more, right? A lot of schools are still test optional, but most students who are getting into top universities, the majority of them are still submitting really strong test scores, right? But I think the one thing that has shown us through this COVID year, or the COVID years, I should say, is that the essays are really important, right? The essays are really important. Okay. All right. So now we're going to do an exercise, right? Everyone should have their worksheet in there, right? Not the cheat book, but there's the other worksheet packet in there. So I want you to pull that up right now, and we're going to do a brainstorming exercise for your personal statements, right? So we're going to do something called mapping your life out, right? On that first page of the worksheet, you should see basically like a blank page there, right? And what I want you to do is spend about 5-10 minutes to write out as many, experiences, objects, characteristics, values. There's a value sheet in there, I believe, and a characteristic sheet that you can use as a reference, and just write them out randomly on that page, right? Because what we're going to do is then have you make connections between these different ideas and see if there's something we can come up with, right? And so before we start, I'm going to just walk you through a little bit like how I did it, right? So I was thinking about, as a high schooler, this is what my life looked like for me, right? Now, you should have way more stuff, right? But I was really into, filmmaking and creativity, and this is a video editing software, and I took photography. I also found a bicycling club, and I was in Boy Scouts and other things like that, right? You can also see there's some values I have, like harmony, and I'm an easygoing person, right? And making decisions is really difficult for me. And then what you're going to do is you're going to make connections here, right? And so I thought to myself, well, these things were all kind of connected to me because I have an experience of making films with my friends, right? And that was a really important thing I did in my high school career. It wasn't for school necessarily. It was something I did for fun, but it taught me a lot about leadership and what it means to work with other people and overcoming my own insecurities about making decisions for myself and other people, right? And so that's what we're trying to do. And so for you, you'll probably have, your goal is to have more stuff than this. And also, then you'll probably have more webs of things to connect, right? Not just one, but you'll probably have multiple webs of things. And I can actually think of other webs that I could connect here, right? But take about 5-10 minutes, right? Just write whatever's in your head. This is brainstorming, so there's no judgment of ideas, right? It's just to write down whatever is inside your head and get it on a piece of paper and start really thinking about your experiences, right? And even if you're in 9th grade, right, this is a good exercise to do because what you want to think about is not just the fact that you do certain activities, but thinking about what values do I have as a person, what characteristics do I have as a person, right? And what do I think about them, right? How do I demonstrate those things? How do I test those things? How do I challenge those things, right? For everyone online as well, they should have access to a digital version of the worksheets. So everyone take about 5-10 minutes, right? And brainstorm, right? Brainstorm. No judgment of ideas here, okay? If you have questions, please let me know as well. Does everyone have a pen? Anyone need a pen? Pencil? No? You're doing the exercise? That's awesome. Great. All right, so I'm going to ask for some volunteers in a minute, but I want to walk you through what does this rest of this exercise kind of lead to, right? And so the next thing you might be thinking of is, well, I have all these ideas on my piece of paper. How does this turn into an essay, Yuki? You haven't told me yet. Well, I'm going to tell you right now, all right? So how do I structure my essay? So this is a very simple structure, right? But it works well for a lot of students in their essays, right? This is basically a narrative structure, right? So who could tell me what a narrative is? How about Melody? Do you know what a narrative is? Yes, a narrative is a story. It's essentially a story, right? A story has a beginning, middle, end, right? It's usually about one thing that happens. And this is a structure I recommend to all of my students, right? Because it works really well. And sometimes students might feel, well, if everyone's using the same structure, how is my essay going to stand out, right? And it's not the point, right? The structure is there to give you a guideline for how to form your essay, right? And if you think about it, every movie you watch or every TV show you watch or every book you read generally follows the same kind of structure, right? And yet you don't think, oh, I'm tired of books or movies because they have the same structure, right? It's more about the details that you include in your story that makes it different, right? And so I'm not going to dive into all of this, but basically you want to start off with an intro or hook, right? So the important thing about an intro or hook in your essay is that, think about this, right? When a college admissions officer is evaluating applications, they're going to be reading hundreds of applications over the course of the application season, right? And if the first sentence in your essay doesn't make me want to read the second essay or the second sentence in your essay, then it's probably not going to be a good essay, right? If it doesn't hook me from the beginning, if it doesn't create a question in my head or a sense of mystery or engages me from the very first sentence emotionally, then we got to go back and think about how do we make a stronger hook, right? And then we talk about what challenges did I face, right? And so we're talking about some event that happened in your life. And again, right, it's not just about how awesome you are, but what challenge you overcome or encounter, right? Whether it's internally, maybe it's something you struggle personally with, or maybe it's something external that you struggle with other people or some other challenge. Usually the best essays will have both of it present in the essay, right? And then to talk about, well, what did you do about that challenge, and what did you think and feel about it, right? Because again, the essay is not just about something that happened, but how do you engage with that challenge? What did you think about it? How did your mindset shift, right? What did you feel? And then what did you learn from that experience, right? So every success, every failure, every experience is a learning opportunity for us, right? And so it's a moment for us to think about, well, what did I learn about myself? What did I learn about other people? What did I learn about the world through this experience, right? And then ultimately your conclusion, right? Where we get to see, well, after all this has happened, how have you changed from the beginning of the essay to the end? And how does this person move into the future, right? How does whatever happened to you here affect your behavior moving into the future as a person, right? And so just to go back, right? This is my life mapping, right? As a high schooler, I was really interested in filmmaking and creating videos and being creative, right? And one of the primary things I used was Adobe Premiere Pro, which is a video editing software, right? And other things that were really difficult about that for me were making decisions, right? It's really, I'm a very indecisive person, to be honest, right? And so making decisions is very difficult for me. And, but when you're directing a video, right, it's all about making decisions, right? It's all about telling other people what to do, choosing what shots to take, all that kind of stuff, right? And that conflicts with my other big value of myself, which is harmony, right? I don't like to have people upset at me or angry at me. I like everyone to get along. I'm a really easygoing person. So those things were my internal struggle, right? On one level, my external struggle is telling people what to do and making sure that we make a good video. Internally, I'm struggling with these things, right? Making decisions and overcoming my, top one value of making sure that everyone is happy, right? You can kind of see how making everyone happy, while that can be a good thing, can also be a bad thing, right? Because if you're making everyone happy, then people walk all over you or take advantage of you, all those kinds of things, right? And so how does that fit into a structure, right? Now, give everyone a moment to read through this, right? But if I was writing my personal statement, right, this is probably something what it would look like, right? A hook to get you interested in what is going on, right? And so the hook that I'm using here is to paint a very vivid picture about a very, very emotionally intense moment for me, right? I'm sitting in the dark, looking at all the footage that I've taken, I've been up all night, right? My eyes are bloodshot, right? I'm trying to choose what clips to use and what not to use, right? And I kind of explained this already, but what challenge did I face, right? That in making a movie, right, it's all about making decisions, but I'm very indecisive, right? I don't like to make the wrong decision. I don't like to be wrong. And also telling people what to do makes me super uncomfortable, right? Because I don't like to boss people around, right? And I don't like to make people do things that they don't want to do, right? And so what did I do about that, right? Well, at first, what I try to do is lead by committee, right? Get everyone's opinions, making sure that we're all in agreement about things, right? But what that led to is just people arguing all the time. And instead of coming to good decisions, all we did was talk in circles and everyone got angry at each other, right? So in my pursuit of harmony, that actually led to failure in my situation, right? And so at a certain point, I need to be courageous and make a decision for everyone, even if it's the wrong one, right? It's part of that's part of what it is to be a leader, right? To take ownership of those decisions and be someone who decides, right? And so what did I learn from this, right? That it's impossible to make everyone happy, right? And that as a leader, right, I can get feedback from people and try to make everyone happy, but at the end of the day, someone has to make a decision, and I had to learn to be ruthless not only with myself, but with my ideas and other people, and to make that decision for people, right? Even if it makes me uncomfortable, right? Confronting my own fears about those things. And then in the end, right, when we have a final product and we show that video to our friends or put it online or whatever, right, I'm having to accept that responsibility, right? For the good things, right, sure, I get credit, but also is credit to my team, right? But also, when we have bad parts of our video or bad parts of our film, right, then that becomes my responsibility, right? If I'm a good leader, I don't just blame everyone else, right? I have to take responsibility for those things, right? And you can kind of see how this is a very pivotal moment for me in my life, right? And it doesn't really have anything to do with academics or my other extracurricular activities. This is in fact one of my hobbies that I was doing for fun, right? But it taught me a very important lesson about life and leadership and what it means to take responsibility and make decisions, right? So that's the kind of reflection that we're looking for through your personal statements, right? Now, I prepared this beforehand, so I already have an answer. But does anyone else want to volunteer, be brave, and think about what does your story look like potentially? Do you have any ideas, Rose?
For the intro, I could start like, as a child, I never really knew what I wanted in life, and that like the challenges I faced, which is not knowing what I want to do. And then, what did I do about it? Well, I could talk about one of the internships I did, which really was like a pivotal movement in changing my thoughts. What did I learn during that internship? Like the skills, like maybe leadership, like you said. And then in conclusion, how can I use my skills in the future after university and in life?
Awesome. That was awesome. Great job. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for or I guess I volunteered you, but thank you so much for sharing. But that's really great, right? That's, I think you were getting the idea of it, right? Which is like, you had this internship and you had this really important experience, right? And that's awesome, right? But it's not just about the fact that you completed an internship, but it's also about what did I learn about myself and these other qualities to be a leader or whatever it might be, right? A lot of students write about a lot of different things. I think the important thing to keep in mind is that, there are certain things that you probably don't want to talk about in an essay. Like if it's like really, really super personal, it's probably not good. Or if you're talking about something really cliche, like, I'm playing basketball and I was the last one to make the buzzer beating shot and everyone won and I'm super awesome, right? That's probably not something you want to write about. But a lot of students write about things that are very mundane, like I said before, right? Like buying their first pair of shoes that they earned with their own money, or driving around the city on their own motorbike, or we're about to read, right? Not liking to wear dresses, right? So there's a lot of different things they can talk about. And really, I think the one thing that a lot of students also forget about is that there is the personal aspect of the personal statement, right? There's a reason why it's called a personal statement, right? Because it's about yourself and your life. Okay, so let's analyze a personal statement, right? In that same packet, there is an example essay in there, right? This is the essay I've been talking about. It's called I Hate Dresses, right? So everyone take about 3 to 7 minutes to read the essay, right? There's a couple questions on the side of it that you can consider, right? And then also, I'm going to walk you through some other questions, right, about that we were talking about. Is it self-reflective? Is it self-aware? All these different kinds of things, right? But as we're reading the essay, try to think about the structure too, right? Does the first sentence grab your attention, right? What is the challenge they face? What did they learn? What is the conclusion of the essay, right? So everyone take about 3 to 7 minutes, right? And then we'll talk about it. Okay, all right. Everyone online reading, I hope? Yeah? All right, so what did you guys think about this essay? How about you? What did you think of the essay?
She have a lot of courage to like start a sentence with her demand like that.
She has a lot of courage to start the essay the way she did. I think that's really good, yeah. How about you, man? What did you think of the essay?
Wait, actually, is it a she or he? I can't tell, actually.
Can't tell? Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's part of the mystery of the essay, right? But what did you think of the essay? You like it? Not like it?
I feel like it's more of a life-telling story, more like saying what you should know about life.
What you should know about life, right? So I think that's really good, right? What about you, Melody? Did you like the essay?
Yeah, I think it kind of encompasses who they are as a person and their thoughts.
Yeah. So I didn't get your name. What did you think of the essay?
I think the essay is very clear, and it clearly states who the author is and how they feel. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely, right? Very clear about who they are as a person, right? Parents, do you have any thoughts? No? Okay, all right. What about you? What about you, Rose? What did you think of it?
Yeah, I think it was unique, not like interesting.
Yeah, right. I really love this essay. I think this is a really awesome essay. It's a really strong essay. And I think everyone is kind of picking up on a couple really important things, right? It really clearly represents who they are as a person, right? It's very brave and vulnerable with what they're talking about, right? And you get a really clear sense of what they value, what's important to them. And I think they're also very courageous with the essay, right? About what they're talking about. And again, right, I don't think it's something that a lot of us would think about writing about for a personal statement, right? And on one level, the essay is about dresses, right? But on another level, the essay is about being comfortable with who you are and having that confidence, right? So as we move forward, right, let's talk about this, right? Let's ask a couple questions. Does the intro want you to read more? From the very first sentence, does it make you want to continue reading the essay? What do you guys think? Yes, no? Yes, sort of? Sort of? Okay. What about you guys? Would you think does it make you want to keep on reading the essay from the very first sentence?
I think it depends on like whether you agree with like her opinions or not.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think that's good, right? Actually, I think that's really good because it shouldn't be something that you just feel like, I already know the answer, right? I actually think if you're being a little bit divisive, a little bit polarizing, then that makes it interesting, right? And I mean, I think it starts off really great, right? I hate dresses, right? It's a really short sentence, declarative sentence, but it makes me think about, okay, well, where is this essay going to go, right? Is it by the end that she's going to love the dresses? Is she going to continue to hate dresses, right? It's a very simple statement, but it makes me want to continue reading more throughout the essay, right? All right. What is the challenge being faced? Who can tell me what challenge she is facing in the essay? Volunteer. Or I will volunteer you. Melody, what do you think the challenge is that they're facing?
Dress when they didn't want to.
Having to wear a dress when they didn't want to. So I think that's definitely the main challenge in there, right? Do you see any other challenges that they're facing?
They're not comfortable with themselves, and especially when they wear dresses because they feel like it's like showing more of themselves.
Yeah, right. So I think it's on two levels, the challenge, right? One level, the external struggle, right? Just simply wearing a dress, right? But the deeper internal struggle is, well, if I wear a dress, what will people think about me, right? Am I comfortable with myself, right? What determines what I think about myself? What I wear or who I am as a person, right? And then what do they do about it, right? What do they do about that challenge, right? What do they do about that challenge, Rose?
They overcome their fears and try it out.
Yeah. How do they do that?
They try on a dress.
They try on a dress, right? They try on a dress. Well, she goes to this competition in Prague, right? And then through that competition where she wins, right, then she gains the confidence and feels like, well, what could it hurt to wear this dress, right? And confronts her own fears about not liking to wear a dress, right? And then we get to the crucial part of the essay, right? What do they learn? What is the lesson they learn about themselves or about other people or about the world? What do you guys think?
So it's like when she actually try wearing the dresses, she began think like it's relaxed. It's like it doesn't like that bad as she think it before.
Yeah. It's good, right? It's not as bad as she thinks it's going to be, right? What else? Can someone else tell me a lesson that they feel like they get from this essay? I'm walking to you in the back.
I think that she learned that she doesn't really have to care what the environment thinks about her, and then everyone has a right to do what they want as long as it's, not in a bad way. But then she finds out that she could also wear a skirt if she wins a competition, because why not? She can win one, so then she can wear one.
Yeah, awesome answer. Thank you very much. So I think all those things are right? I think to me the lesson is that, well, It's not about what you wear that determines what, how I feel about myself, being masculine and not masculine, right? Masculinity isn't tied to what I'm wearing, but rather what I think about myself as a person, right? And not letting the external world dictate what I think about myself as a person in the end, right? That's a really powerful message, right? Especially as I think a high schooler, right? In high school, you face so much pressure from your classmates, your peer groups to be one way or another and what other people think about you, right? And to face those things head on and be true to yourself and your identity, right? That's a really important lesson to learn as a person. And what does the conclusion say? What does it say about the future? What do you guys think it says about the future for this person?
I think it's just basically changing their mind how she think about dress, and yeah, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of related to the lesson that they learn, right? Which is like being true to yourself and being confident in who you are and really trusting yourself, I think, in a lot of ways, right? Okay, so a couple more questions, right? What do you guys think? Is the author self-reflective? Raise your hand if you think yes. Only two people think that she's self-reflective. All right, well, I think they're very self-reflective, right? They really think upon their situation, their identity, who they are, right? Are they self-aware? Yeah, more people think they're self-aware. All right, cool. Very self-aware, I think, right? Let's just click through these, right? Are they vulnerable? Is the author vulnerable, right? Yeah, I think they're very vulnerable about, to talk about your identity in this way, right? She even mentions about her parents who are very judging, right? And to be able to express those things in an essay, I think is very vulnerable, right? She's putting herself out there, right? And then does it show, are they humble? Are they humble about themselves, right? What do you guys think? Are they humble? Yeah? Yeah? I think they're pretty humble, right? I think there's an interesting thing that happens in this essay, though, right? Which is that they talk about this competition that they go to in Prague, and they win, right? They win. But that's not what the essay is about, right? It's not about how they won it for their team and how awesome they are, right? It's more just an event that's part of the story, right? A very crucial part, but just an event that happens, right? Does it show that they are capable of learning and growing? Yeah, I definitely think so, right? Is the essay braggy? Do they brag about themselves and how awesome they are? Right? I don't think so, right? Even though they talk about winning that competition, I don't think they're not making that the focus of their essay, right? And then, is it about something impressive, right? Again, I don't think it's something impressive does happen in that essay, and they are a very impressive person throughout the rest of their application, but it's not the focal point of their essay, right? It's about themselves, right? The personal aspect, their identity, their confidence, being secure in who they are, right? All right, so did everyone love this essay? Yeah, I love this essay. I mean, but I like that you say you maybe sort of don't love it, right? Because I think that's actually a really important thing to point out, which is that there is no secret formula to their essay that is like, if you write about this thing and write about it like this, then you're definitely going to get into a university, right? It's important to remember that because there's going to be another person, a human being reading your essay, and it's impossible to predict what that human being is going to relate to or engage with, right? And so that's why a lot of students sometimes feel like, oh, I want to write about something impressive to make myself seem as cool or intelligent or awesome or hardworking as possible. But, for one thing, that's kind of boring to read. But for another thing, you don't know if that thing's going to be the thing that actually impresses the other person, right? They're a human being, right? And the best way is to just be authentic and genuine to yourself and your experiences. And hopefully you make an emotional connection with the reader, right? Oh, yes.
One thing I want to add is that so everyone that's reading this essay is viewing it through a cultural lens, right? And the readers that you guys are going to be writing your essays to, they're going to come from an American-centric cultural, standpoint. So they're looking at it through that American lens. And I think that's especially why it's really important to have like an EC who's looking at your essay, who's going to help you to shape it for that culture, right? Because, well, you guys might read this essay and feel like, it's okay. Americans read this essay and they're like, wow, that is amazing. That's impressive. And those things don't necessarily translate across cultures really well. So it's really important to have someone who has that American-centric view to be able to look at your essay and say, are you hitting those touch points that's going to really touch those admissions officers?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jay. Preview from Jay, who will be joining me very shortly from right now. Okay, and so, all right, the last thing I just want to leave you off with, right, for everyone here, right, because I know everyone in this room is doing really awesome stuff with your extracurricular activities. You have internships. I'm sure you're in a lot of clubs. I'm sure you're doing a really awesome volunteering work or community service work or whatever it might be, right? But colleges really care more about not just what you did, but what you think about what you did, right? What you think about your life, the perspective you have about yourself, and what you learned and how you grew and being self-aware. All these kinds of things are the things that makes a difference between getting into a really competitive college and not getting in, because everyone else you're competing against is going to be very brilliant, right? And so you have to find the other way to make yourself stand out. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to invite Jay, who just spoke, up to the stage where we talk about how do you get into an Ivy League, right? But before that, Miss Kristin will...
Yes. The students, you can leave most of your things here, maybe take your personal effects. We're going to go into a classroom and we're going to talk about the SAT and do a little bit of practice and a little game. So if the students would follow me, please. We will be back shortly.
Okay, awesome. And then while the students are leaving, we'll put chairs over here. Okay, so while the students are in another room getting a demo lesson for the SAT, we're here to talk to the parents and the online crowd about how to get into an Ivy League, because this is a question that always comes up. Parents always want to know, how do I get my student or child into an Ivy League? And so we're going to address that question head on. More about who gets in, who doesn't get in, and what you can do about it. And so first, Jay, if you'd like to introduce yourself a little bit.
Okay, so my name is Jay Bills. I did my undergrad in psychology at UC Irvine, and my master's was at Harvard, and that was in technology, innovation, and education. And I've been working in admissions advising and education consulting for about 7 years. I've gotten into students in schools like Harvard, Stanford, Duke, USC, UCLA, Berkeley, so a lot of top schools. So I've got a lot of experience with doing this, and I've seen a lot of ways that students have tried and failed and tried and succeeded.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much. So first, we're going to talk about what I was mentioning a lot before, right, which is grades and test scores to get into these top colleges, right? Because I see so many students taking so many classes and different subjects, and while it's all really good, right, it's only one piece of the puzzle. And I'll have Jay walk through some charts to show you exactly why, although that's really important, it's only one factor.
So now this data was pulled from niche.com. So this is about 26,000 students applying to 7 of the Ivy schools and looking at like what the acceptance rates are. So these green dots are all people that got in. And this is usually the type of information that people see, right? They see the students that got in, and you see the bulk of it is up here in this tight corner up here. The bottom, this is our SAT scores, right? So it looks like the majority of these students with SATs are about 1450 and above, maybe even coming down to about in the 1400 mark, but mostly 1450 and above. And for our GPA, the bulk of this is, I mean, that's about 3.7 and up, right? And a lot of them more around the 3.8 and up. So most of us, we look at this and we say, okay, I need to have a 3.8 or higher, and I need a 1500 or higher on the SAT, right? Let's see what we look at when we see the students that got rejected. The majority of the students that get rejected are up in this same region here. So it's kind of like it's conflicting information. What's going on here? If I got the highest scores, I got the highest chance of getting in. If I got the highest scores, I got the highest chance of getting rejected. So what's happening here is that you've got a lot of the students with the highest scores who are applying, right? Some of them are getting in, some of them are getting rejected. The scores, the GPA, they're just a threshold measure. Once you've met the threshold, they stop looking at your scores. And we see the same pattern when we look at other schools like MIT, same pattern of projection. Same thing when we look at Stanford. So this is telling us a story that we need more than just the scores to be able to get into the schools. So that's what we're going to be talking with you about right now.
Yeah, definitely. So can you go to the next slide, Jay? So I brought this slide up many times, but I just want to keep on emphasizing this, right? Which is, you can see at the top there, right, that grades in courses, grades in prep courses, strength of curriculum, test scores, yes, they are rated considerable importance, right? But as you saw from those past charts, right, once you're in that league, once you're in that zone, right, of having super high test scores, super high GPA, then all these other things matter, right? Your recommendations, your extracurricular activities, your work experience, right, all hold really high moderate importance, right? And it's all those nudge factors, the essays, your ECAs, the story that you are telling through the things that you do are going to be a thing that nudges you into acceptance or rejection, right? And that's really important because a lot of students do just as much as possible, right? They don't really critically think about, why am I joining this club? Why am I volunteering for this thing? Why am I doing XYZ activity? I'm just going to do as much as I can, but they don't really reflect upon, why is this important to me, to my local community, to the world, right? And ultimately at top universities, right, they want students who are going to go there that have, that are going to do great things in the world after university and then bring more prestige to that university back, right? Because ultimately that's what is going to attract more students to that university. So with that being said, Jay, when it comes to activities, they hold such high importance, right? What kind of activities do get into top universities like that?
Well, there's not really a one-size-fits-all answer here. So I'm sure a lot of you guys have heard, your son or daughter, they need to play an instrument, they need to do 100 hours of community service, they need to do an internship, they need to do all these things, and then that will make them a good candidate. The problem is, if everyone is doing that, just like if everyone's getting the high scores, all it does is make you blend in, and our goal is for you to stand out, right? So instead of trying to follow a pattern, what we do with our students is we get them to try a lot of different things, and we try to find out where their passion is and get them to focus especially on one activity and go really deep with it, where they can actually do an independent project and have some level of impact, so that when they're applying, they actually stand out in that one area where when the admissions officers look at their essays, they look at their resume, they say, wow, that's the aeronautics student, right? Or that's the veterinary student who had all of these activities in this one area. That's what our goal is, get you to stand out, not do the same thing everyone is doing, try to be good in a lot of different areas. We want you to be great in one area.
Yeah, and I think the really important thing to consider is that the earlier we start this, right, grade 9, grade 10, the more time we have with the student to explore different activities, explore different interests, and really see what do they like or what do they not like, right? Because understanding what they don't like is just as important, right? And for the older students who are in grade 11 or grade 12, right, if you're, we have less time, but we still have some time to do those things. But especially if you're applying, then it becomes all the more important that as an applying student that, you have someone like us or the student themselves take a critical look at all the different things they've done and think about, well, what is the story that I can tell about this, right? What is the connective tissue here, right? What is the running theme between all these things? Because ultimately, when it comes time for your personal statements or supplemental essays that you have to write for every school, you're going to be wanting to point towards some kind of direction that, hey, this is that special thing that I'm interested in. This is that focus that I have that Jay is talking about, right? And stories really at that level are the currency of your application, right? That's the thing that they're going to pay attention to beyond just your GPA, test scores, awards, all those different kinds of things, right? Crafting that story is super important. And so, Jay, another thing that I think a lot of students talk about or parents mention that comes up often is like, and you mentioned it too, but what about research or internships? How important is it that my student or child has a research position or an internship?
So research is actually a great way to have some impact. But when you think about what professional researchers do at universities, right, well, the first step that they take when they're thinking about approaching a new research project is they look at what is the gap in knowledge that I need to fill with my research, right? So they have to go and they have to look at all the research that's out there and see what's missing, what don't we know that we need to know, right? And that's how they make their research meaningful. Students often skip that step, and so they end up creating research that the answers to the problems they're looking at have already been solved. So the research really just ends up being a personal exercise and doesn't really have that impact. So we want to get them working with a consultant or have an advisor, maybe at a university. So we have one of our resources here, Kieran, has a lot of connections with universities and is able to get our students access to advisors who can help them to actually create a research project that creates some level of impact by creating new knowledge that didn't exist before, right? That's a great way to stand out. Do something that's actually meaningful and useful to people outside of yourself.
Yeah, and I think when it comes time for internships too, right? Just like for research, is the thing is, I think a lot of students aren't thinking about why are they doing something, right? Thinking about that why, looking around the world and really considering what is a problem or challenge that I see in the world, and how do I want to try to solve that thing, right? Too many students, like what Jay is talking about when it comes to research, is just, hey, if I do research, I can check off a box and then I'm on my way to an Ivy League, right? But it's less about the fact that you did that research and more about, well, why does that research matter at all in the first place, right? And then same for any internships or work experience you have too, right? It's not just about the fact that you have a job, but it's about what you are doing at that job, right? Are you just grabbing coffee for people? Or are you doing something meaningful and learning a practical skill and learning more about the industry that you really care about, right?
Yeah, so with internships, like you're saying, often when students do get internships, it ends up being, 3 to 4 weeks. And that's barely enough time to train someone. So you're not going to be doing anything really meaningful or helpful for that company or organization. So instead, unless there's some competitive nature to getting into that internship, where the getting in is, something that helps to see some competencies that you have, it really, there's better ways to be spending those 3 to 4 weeks that might be able to have more impact. Otherwise, if you can find an organization that you can be a part of for 6 months or a year, and then be able to prove your worth in some smaller areas and gain greater responsibility to where you might have access to a larger independent project, that can be a great asset in your application. But if it's not going to be a long-term thing where you're going to have those opportunities for growth, there are better ways to spend your time.
Yeah, definitely. And again, right, I think it's even for an internship, it's thinking about, well, what field am I working in and why am I working in it? And what is a problem that I see that I'd want to affect in some way, right? What about the old classic, Jay, community service?
Okay, so community service is something that colleges have really kind of shifted their mindset around on over the past couple of decades, especially. It used to be a standard that 100 hours of community service was almost like an absolute necessity. But colleges really saw a lot of that as being inauthentic, right? Students would hit that 100-hour mark and then, okay, I'm out of here, I'm done. That doesn't tell us much about your character, right? So, again, it's similar to the internships, that if it's something where you can be a part of an organization for an extended period of time, actually, and find an organization that you are actually passionate about what they're doing. If you want to go into veterinary, medicine, go and volunteer at an animal shelter or at an animal hospital. Absolutely. That's a great way to spend your time. You'll learn more about the major that you want to study. It'll help you, see whether or not it's actually something you want to do for the rest of your life. Then they can see a coherence between what you say are your interests and your behaviors, right? What activities you're actually pursuing. But if you're just doing it just to check a box, there's a famous company, I'm going to go and intern at Google, it's not going to be meaningful.
Yeah, and I think, one really important aspect of that is, your intentionality with what you're doing in terms of community service, right? Because what I see a lot with students also is that they might do community service, which is like, hey, I'm going to go visit this school in this far region of Thailand and go for a day or two and donate some stuff and maybe build something, and then come back and then never interact with that community ever again, right? And then their whole list is filled with things like that. And, that doesn't really show any kind of commitment to a specific cause or intention and what you're trying to do to solve a problem, right? You're just going there and doing something and then coming back and, yeah, you feel good about yourself. But, how does that help that community long term, right? The problems that are really at the root of what's affecting them, right? And the students that are really, getting into these top colleges are thinking deeply about not just, hey, there's a problem that exists, but what is the root of these problems and how do we tackle that root, right? Why do these problems exist in the first place and how do I tackle that, right?
Absolutely. And just to add one little more point, there's also been kind of a shift in thinking. Like back in the 80s and the 90s, we still had the mentality of we're prosperous, we can go into this less prosperous area and we can help them, right? This kind of savior complex mentality. And we've, really started shifting our mindset around that and starting to see that that's kind of a toxic mentality. It's not really helpful to people. And so we also don't want to encourage students to perpetuate that same mentality.
Yeah, definitely. All right. And so you went to Harvard, you earned your master's there and studied education there, right? What would you say from your experience there, a school like Harvard is looking for in a student?
Okay, so the biggest thing that they're looking for is students who are going to be change makers. Students that are going to see problems in the world and take actions to work towards solving those problems. They don't have to succeed, right? We often don't succeed the first time or the second time, right? We have to iterate and keep trying. But they want to see people that are out there doing something about the problems that they see.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because a lot of students might want to study something like computer science, for example, right? And they feel like, well, I want to study computer science because I want to have a good job later, right? I mean, obviously, right? That's why we go to college, right? To live a good life later. But, a lot of them aren't thinking about, well, what is a problem I want to solve with computer science, right? What is the challenge I see out there, right? What is a problem or challenge, and how can I help people through that pursuit of a certain field, right? Again, like I said before, colleges want students to come to their university that are ultimately going to go off and do great things and be able to say, I went to this university, right? And colleges love that, and that's what they want to be able to see, right? And ultimately, those are the kind of people I think we should all be striving to be, right? People who look at the world, see a problem, and then decide to engage with it and try to improve it in some way, right? That's how we make a better world together. Okay, so before we go have some questions from the audience, I think we have some pre-submitted questions. We'll also take questions from the audience, both online and offline. But before we get to there, Jay, do you have any final words of advice for the parents that we have here today?
Yeah, so some of the things you can do, in order to get the students to be that standout student, right, they really have to find their passion and start pursuing it. Some of the things you guys can do to help them out: encourage your kids to read the news, right? You have to know what's going on around you in order to actually see the problems that you want to solve. So talk with them about, the news article that you read about whatever is happening in politics, or about that new data security breach. Talk with them about the issues that are happening around them to start getting them thinking about what are the problems that actually need to be solved. That's a really great first step.
Yeah, I think the reading thing is really important because I think a lot of, like Ms. Kristin said about SAT, right? Reading and writing is actually the thing that students struggle with the most, right? And that's not something you can fix overnight. There are strategies we can teach you to help you with that, but really building a reading habit is something that you have to build over time, and that will actually improve your language skills the most, right? But you have to spend the time dedicated to doing that. And then just like Jay said, I think some of the best ideas I've had or ideas I've come across is because I read a news article, I read a paper, or I read a certain book, and that inspires me to think about other things, right? And really engage with ideas. And then I think, in addition to what Jay says, not just being aware about the world, but really encouraging your kids to think that you can do something about it, right? A lot of high school students just feel like, well, I'm a high school student. What could I possibly do to tackle this massive problem in the world, like hunger or poverty or whatever it is? But the truth is that there are high schools all over the place doing really, really incredible things, right? And you don't have to solve the entire problem. Maybe it's just affecting your neighborhood around that problem, right? And even that is incredible, right? And high schoolers can do those things, right? And a lot of times high schoolers just don't believe that they can do certain things because they're so young, but they're a lot more capable than they really think they are. Yeah. Okay, great. So now we can open up for Q&A, question and answer. I think we had some pre-printed questions somewhere. But does anyone in the audience have any questions that they'd like to ask? Yes.
Actually, today I'm very happy that I listened to you, not from the school, but some institute outside the school speaking about helping the kids to get into the Ivy League, into a good university in US. What I find out that if you see the number of Thai students in the previous year, 10 years, getting into Ivy League is very low compared to our population. Very, very low, very strange. Our kids get medals, get all the stuff, but to get into Ivy League, the percentage are very low. Then I find it a little bit difficult to understand that when we send our kid to international school in Thailand, it's not a plus point, it becomes a minus point even. I give you the example, the issue in here that we could, I raised the problem so we could understand each other. Like, if they're excellent in study, they want to get the medal in Olympics or Olympiad, there's no international student could get into Olympiad in Thailand. The exam is in Thai. The exam of the Olympiad is in Thai. So your kids are good in chemistry. They cannot go, your school doesn't know about Olympiad also. You talk to Shrewsbury, you talk to Nice, you talk to ISP. I did not see any kid got the Olympiad medal. Maybe once in 10, 20 years or something. That's strange. Second thing, in Thailand, when your kids want to do internship, they are underage. The law did not even permit your kids to do the internship. You're talking about doing the research in the university. Which university give you the research? Give you to go and attend? Not even a single university. If your father is not a doctor in the hospital, you will never get. If your father is not, if the kid father is not the professor in that line, how could the kid get to the university and do a research like what you said? So this is a missing connection. It's a no bridging in Thailand. I'm very happy that you mentioned all this stuff, but if we could fill up the gap, it would be a nice that all the kids who's here, they all are they intend to get into the Ivy, and they have a potential to get into the Ivy League, but the opportunity should be given to them also, right?
Yeah, definitely. It's a great question, great comment. So yeah, I think a couple things. So I think just to restate, in case anyone didn't hear right, I think one is that out of all the Thai population, right, there's only a couple students that make it into the Ivy Leagues, right? And it can feel like international schools are maybe at a disadvantage, especially when it comes to things like Olympiads, because it's in Thai and not English, right? And then also the restrictions legally around whether students can work or to get a research position or write some kind of research paper, right, also puts like international students at a disadvantage, right? So there's a lot to unpack there, right? A lot to address, right? I think one thing I will say is that, when it comes time for Ivy League or top 20 university, the reason why we talked about it here today is because that's what parents always want to know about, right? Because that's also what parents always hear about in terms of schools, right? And, one thing I think to keep in mind though is that when you're at that level of high of a school, right, for any kind of student, it's going to be a gamble on some level, right? Like we kind of pointed out that chart, right? Even if you have perfect test scores, perfect grades, right? It's going to be very, very difficult for you to get into these schools, right? So for any student, US or international, right? And then, the truth of the matter is that every school is going to have a certain quota of how many students it will accept from every country, right? So Harvard may accept maybe 5, 6 Thai students at most, right? And then because they also have to choose other students from every other country around the world to maintain that kind of diversity, right? So I think one thing is that these schools are going to be very, very difficult to get into in the first place, right? And although we're talking about the Ivy Leagues, I think one thing I also want to mention is that there are hundreds of schools in the US, right? And personally, I don't like to hone in on rankings, right? Because rankings can be very arbitrary, right, in the way they rank things. And just because you see an overall ranking for a school doesn't mean that they're going to be the best school for your child in terms of what they want to study necessarily, right? So I think that's one thing to keep in mind, that you can be very successful at a lot of different kinds of schools, right? Whether or not it's the Ivy Leagues, right? But I think the other points you bring up are really good, right? Olympiads, right? Restricted to Thai students, right? I think that is a very difficult challenge to overcome, right? However, what I would also say is that getting an Olympiad medal is not a requirement to getting into an Ivy League necessarily, right? If you want to study things like math or chemistry or whatever it might be, right? That could be a really, really, really strong addition to your application. But like I said, previously in the presentation, just because you have an Olympiad medal doesn't necessarily mean that you're engaging with that material in a critical way, right? I've met students who are IMO winners, and then when I talk to them about, well, why is math important, they can't really give me a good answer, right? And that's not very great, right? Like, you should be thinking about, how do I apply this math, or why it's important in life, or why does it matter at all, right? So I think that's one thing, right? Now, usually if you're going down a STEM type of pathway, right, you're either thinking about the competition route, like you're talking about Olympiads, or you're talking about the research route, right? And the other research or lab work or internship route, right, which I think is very important, right? How do we get those opportunities, right? And true, I think legally, right, is very restrictive, right? But the internships that you get or the positions you get don't necessarily have to be on paper. Hey, I have an internship, I have a job, right? There's a lot of other ways to do those kinds of things, like to have a shadowing position, right, where you shadow or volunteer a laboratory or a hospital or something like that, right? And a lot of times, even though legally it might be restricted in that way, you'll be surprised by how much of a response you could potentially get by just reaching out to professors by sending out an email, and the fact that you're a high schooler who's very interested in a specific field that a professor is researching, right, and contacting them and making a connection with them, right? Because a lot of times, right, if a high schooler is reaching out to me something about that I'm researching as a professor, an adult will be very much like, wow, I really love that you're a young person who wants to engage with me in that way, right? And it might give them an opportunity to help with their research or contribute in some way and gain that experience, right? So there's more unofficial ways to do that. There's also other programs that we partnership with, like there's a program called Polygens, right? Which connects PhD candidates and graduate students and professors from all around the world at different universities. And they will pair you with an online mentor, depending on whatever research you might be interested in, to develop a project, which could be to publish a paper or to work on some other project like developing a podcast or developing some kind of curriculum for language learning or something like that, right? And there's other programs like that too. Another one called Cambridge International Research, which is through Cambridge, right? But they list out different areas of research that they are proposing, and they will give students an opportunity to participate in that research online, right? They don't have to physically be there, right? But again, right, like Jay also mentioned previously, right, one of our consultants, Kieran, right, she has a lot of connections with different professors and different professionals around Bangkok, and she's really a great resource because, you know, part of what we do with our students is that within like the first 5 to 10 meetings, you know, we will meet with a student to get to know them. But then one of those meetings or a couple of those meetings will be to meet with Kieran as well, where she will administer a interest test, a personality test, career kind of test, right, to identify what are they interested in. And then she will look through the database that we have to help identify opportunities that will be appropriate and put together an internship plan or a research proposal plan, and then connect with them the right people to you know, develop that opportunity, right? So I think it can be very tough. The concerns you bring up are very valid and concerning, but there are ways around that, I think, especially if as a student you are someone who is proactive and ambitious and really persistent in trying to discover those opportunities, right, to do something, right? Yeah. I think Jay.
We have one question that came from the online that I'm going to address real quick. So can I apply what was advised about the personal statement today to the admissions of master's degree, or does it just apply to undergraduates? So you don't write a personal statement for a master's degree. Instead, you write a statement of purpose. And a statement of purpose is more about why you want to pursue the specific degree that you're pursuing, and it should speak to some level of the impact that you hope to have with your degree, right? So I would suggest when people write that one that they're going to focus on some of the success that they've had leading up to it, and what's driving them to pursue that, and the impact that they hope to have.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you for sharing your information. And I agree with you. I will share my information about that with you. I kid is Thai. Because now you have two ways for go to the Olympic. Because the competition is in Thai language only, and you have to have the Thai nationality. It's two need. First, after you pass step by step until you is the representative of Thai student for Olympic competition, it's only 6 in one subject. Okay, it's have around 6 subjects. It's mathematics, physics, chemistry, biology, the computer, and the last one is I miss. Okay, and you can read in the website. PORN organization, something like that. Okay. I agree with you. If the kids can't read the Thai language, they don't have get into the competition. Okay, it's a bad opportunity. Okay, and for the Thai student that can get in the Ivy League by shortcut or short term. By the Olympic medal, it's many Thai students from KVIS, MIVS. It can pass through by this way. Okay, I think it's more than a student from international school. Maybe you can find the information. Okay, because that is my idea. Okay? But I think the other idea of because many years ago I come to join the like this for support my kid to the best university. But now I want to share everyone in here for why we find the university that proper with our kids, that they can improve and grow by themselves and be individual, to be unique. What do you think? Because I realized if we try to put or encourage them to be the other that they did not be, maybe it's not the good way. And I stop everything and wait and see, for look and see how they grow by themselves.
Yeah. So one of the
What
things
do you think?
So one of the things.
And how can I find the university that proper with my kids?
Okay, so just to be clear, so you're asking how can we help the students to find their passion, right? To become their own unique self without us trying to force them to be our idea of what would be great, correct? Okay, so one of the things that we do in the first few weeks of when we start meeting with our students is Kieran, one of our education consultants, she does a psychometric test with them that's an interest survey and a learning style survey. So we assess what their learning styles are, their preferred learning styles are, and what their particular interests are. And it gives them a list of potential careers they might be interested in, certain areas where they have strengths, and basically gives them a long list of things that they might enjoy, that they might find interesting. And we usually take that and we start encouraging them to try different activities. So we would usually start out like in 9th grade, we have them do a lot of extracurricular activities, maybe 5 extracurricular activities or 6. Try lots of different things. And then as they go to 10th grade, they shrink that down. As they go to 11th grade, it gets down to only 2 or 3. So you're kind of like funneling them through, right? Try lots of things first. Figure out what you like, figure out what you don't like. This is how we all, decide who we are. We try lots of things throughout our lives. And eventually we come to that conclusion. This is who I am. I really like doing this out of the other options that I have.
Yeah, I think, just to add to that, I think part of what I think you're asking is, top universities, right? Why top universities, or what else can we do, right? Again, I just want to mention that, just because it's it's an Ivy League or it's a top 10 university doesn't mean that it's going to be the right school for every person, right? That there are a lot of schools out there that specialize in a lot of different things, and they may not be ranked well, right? But again, that's because the rankings aren't really based on anything I would consider, if I was a student or even as a consultant, I wouldn't consider it as something important, right? Like when you look at US News World and Ranking, one of the metrics that they use to determine what rank the school should be ranked as is what do other schools think about them, right? That holds a huge weight in how they rank them. And also, how many schools do they retain, or how many students do they retain at their school, right? Personally, as a student, I would think, why do those things even matter to me, right? If I'm worried about getting a job after school, right, I might be more worried about what work opportunities does this university provide me with? What real world experience does this university provide me with, right? And that's not even something that's considered within rankings, right? And so I think, as parents, right, I think you all want the best for your kids, right? And as kids, they want to make you proud to fulfill the things that you want, these high goals that we're giving them, right? And I think that's really great because, on the one hand, we all want to be dreamers and the kids really want to make us proud, right? But on the other hand, I think it's really important to remember that there's more to life than just that ranking of a school, right? And to really consider, well, what is important to me as a person in life, right? Which is kind of what we go back to in terms of the personal statement, right? It's not just about all the awesome stuff I did, but thinking about really, why do I care about those things? What's important to me, right? And thinking for myself, right? Because there might be a program out there for some, like obscure major, right, that you really love. And it might not be at a Harvard, right? It might be at some other school, right? For example, I know a lot of students are interested in business and entrepreneurship. And the number one school for entrepreneurship is Babson College. And it's not even ranked as a top 50 school on national US News and World and Ranking, right? So that's part of what we also do with our students, right? To not only identify these interests with them and to place them into the right communities and right opportunities to develop those things, but then also when it comes time for choosing universities, to really do that deep research and try to think beyond just what is a ranking, what is a reputation, and what do you want out of your experience at college, right? Because that's ultimately what's going to set you up for the rest of your life, right? Yeah. Great questions, though. Great questions. Thank you so much for sharing that information about that. Does anyone else have any questions from the audience? Don't be shy. Any questions from online? No online questions?
Did you address all the ones we had?
Yeah, I don't know what happened to that paper. I know one question that we had submitted before the actual event was, what about scholarships? What about scholarships? How do I attain scholarships, right? College is very expensive these days, and it's a huge investment to make, right? Now, the important thing to understand about scholarships is that there are two types of scholarships. One is a merit scholarship, right? One is merit-based, one is need-based, right? Now, need-based is based upon when you turn in your application and you submit your financial information, they will determine if you are, basically, will we award you money to attend our school, right? Now, there's another kind of scholarship that's a merit-based scholarship that's based on your test scores and your GPA and your profile, right? So that's another really important reason why, some students are like, well, do I need to take the SAT because it's SAT optional? How much does it really matter? But that's why it matters, because if you're looking for scholarships, then SAT scores and GPA matters a lot, right? Because that you will automatically be considered for certain types of scholarships, right? And then, of course, there are institutional scholarships, which are scholarships that are provided through the school that you apply through separately, right? So it's extra work to do that, but it could net you a lot of money. And then there's always lots of other scholarships out there that are not affiliated with any schools, right? There may be really small scholarships, like $1,000 here, $2,000 there, but if you're someone who is really looking for scholarship aid, writing an essay that might take you an hour might net you $1,000, right? You're making $1,000 per hour. That's pretty good. I don't make that much money, right? And so, if you're applying to a dozen of those things, right, maybe you get half of those, but you can make a good chunk of money if you're doing that, right? And so if you're looking for scholarships, my takeaway for everyone would be, one, your grades and test scores matter a lot, right? And then look for scholarships, right? Look for scholarships outside of schools because there's a lot of them available for a lot of different things. For example, if you're a girl and you attend an all-women's college, there are specific scholarships just for that. If you're, a certain type of race or nationality or ethnicity, there are certain type of scholarships for that. If you're a woman or a man, there's certain type of scholarships for that. There's different types of scholarships for all different kinds of things, right? Here's another question we have. Is graduating from a non-famous Thai school in Thailand a problem for university applications? You want to address that?
Okay, so it isn't necessarily. One of the things that schools do consider is what the challenge level of the courses that you have are. So it's not just what your GPA is, but how difficult were the courses you took. So if you do go to a school that doesn't offer honors level or higher level classes, that can be a bit of disadvantage. Some of the ways you can try to outweigh that are to do AP tests outside of school. And that's unfortunately an additional burden upon the student because they've got to study for those APs by themselves. If they can't take the class at the school. But that can be an additional challenge for sure. But it won't necessarily weigh against you. It's just you might not have access to some of the opportunities available to students that go to schools that maybe are more known and have those high-level classes.
Yeah, good answer. Another question we have is any online sources for sample essays, right? There are lots of sample essays out there. If you just Google search for it, I think, right? But I think Jay has a good resource.
Yeah, so Johns Hopkins University, which is jhu.edu, they post on their essays that worked. And if you guys don't know, Johns Hopkins is the #1 medical school in the U.S. It's a really top school. But they have a listing on there that they do essays that worked, and they show 10 essays from every year, and they let you go back like at least a decade. So you have access to about 100 excellent essays that are really good samples of what a personal statement should look like.
Yeah. And another question is, do we offer services for master's students? I know everyone here is younger, but if you are a master's student out there, then we can also help you with that as well. So keep that in mind, reach out to us, and we will help you with that as well. Does anyone else have any other questions? Yeah.
What's your opinion about when the admission consider about the AP score test from the college board and the score from the report card of school? What is the main point or more important in your opinion?
Yeah, so good question, right? It kind of depends, kind of like what Jay was saying. Part of it is if your school does offer an AP curriculum, then choosing to take those AP courses that are more rigorous and more difficult is important because you're demonstrating your academic curiosity to want to challenge yourself, right? And to get good grades in those. And so getting a good grade in your AP classes is actually really important because that shows how much you're trying in it. Colleges will say that actually they don't consider AP exam scores as part of the application, but I don't think that's necessarily true. I think they say that, but once you're at a really high level, right, every little bit counts. So if you're taking, 3 APs on your own and you are scoring 5s on them, right? Of course, I think that's going to be a plus for you, right? It's going to matter a lot, right? But ultimately, I think, your GPA is going to be one of the most important things, right? Your GPA and what classes you're taking, right? To show if you're challenging yourself. If you don't have access to AP classes, then like Jay said, to self-study and then to take those AP exams independently, right?
No.
Really will.
No. My question, Gus, because I talked to my friends about the score of the kids. Some kid is not the same result, such as if they take the calculus BC in the school, someone get the A or someone get B, but when all of them go to take the college exam, AP final, right? The result, someone get 3, someone get 4, someone gets 5. It's not the same result, right? My question is, when the kids send the result both from the report of the school and from the college board, what is the more important for the admission committee?
So I think grades are going to be the most important, right? The grades in their classes that's going to be their GPA is going to be the most important. I think they're going to weigh in after the grades. Then they're going to look at, you did the APs. Doing the APs alone is already a plus, right? Then the score you get on the AP is going to be just kind of bonus, because like John was saying, that they don't necessarily consider the score, or they say they don't consider the score of the AP results, but it does influence their thinking around college readiness. So really it's that they consider the GPA first, primary. It's not like they say, okay, which score did he really get in the calculus? They don't think that way at all. They just look at what his GPA was for all of his classes. Then they will look at, okay, he's done some AP and he's got decent scores on it. That's about the level of consideration. Because remember when we talked about, I showed you guys the slide about what it looked like with people's GPAs and what it looked like with their SAT scores? They don't say, oh, well, this guy got 1,500 on the SAT, this guy got 1,560, we got to take the guy with the 1,560. That's not the mindset at all. For them, you getting the scores is you met the qualification for us to consider you. Now, throw the scores out. We're not looking at the scores anymore. Now we're looking at all the other things. We're looking at like what extracurricular activities he's done. What level of impact do we think this student is going to have? Does that make sense?
Maybe not. Maybe not. Okay, no one knows. But I has been joined the activity from US admission consult. I think when they said they look okay, like you show in your slide, such as the GPA, the cost that matching with the with the faculty that the student should or not, and the GPA and the AP score and standard test. It everything that follow through and matching it or not. But I don't know what is the more important, because the standardized of the AP test is the normal test, is the standardized test, right? But the score of the school is different. It's different school.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. So you're saying that because the AP test is standard across everyone, maybe this one school's calculus class is easier and this other school's calculus class is more difficult, right? I wish it were that high level of a consideration, but obviously, these admissions officers are literally, reviewing hundreds and hundreds of cases. They can't really go into that level of detail of understanding of the schools. So they really try to create a composite score of everything, and then say, is this person college ready? The scores are really more of your entry to where you're considered.
Yeah, so I think, unfortunately, the schools aren't going to know individual by school individually, right? Oh, this school inflates their grades. This school is especially difficult, unless that school has a well-known reputation amongst the universities, right? And I mean, that's a whole separate problem that's difficult to solve because that really relies on the school administration and counselors to build up their school and build up a reputation amongst admissions officers amongst different universities. But one thing I do want to point out here is if you look here, right, if you look at subject test scores, which includes APs, right, you can see how low it kind of is on the consideration of what factors get into a university, right? And then up here, strength of curriculum, though, is what we mean when we say, are you challenging yourself by taking those AP classes in the first place, right? And do you get a good grade in it, right? Now, whether or not it's fair across every single different school is a different story, right? And not every university is going to be able to dig that deep into every single school, see how they're teaching, how are they grading, right? But you can kind of just see at a high level how, it's not really considered that much at a broad level, right? But like Jay was saying, once you're really at the top level universities, right, every little thing is going to matter, right? Every little piece of your application is going to be that much more competitive. It might be the nudging factor, right? But like you mentioned also, and I keep on emphasizing, which is that once you kind of reach a certain threshold of academic capability, right, all the more personal qualities about a person, the things that you can't quantify in a simple number, become much more important to whether or not a student gets accepted, right? Because, for example, there could be a student who is an IMO winner, right? Gold medalist, right? But if his essays don't say anything deep about himself or the world or why he cares about why he even pursued the IMO or why is math important, but there is another student who isn't an IMO winner but still decided to take hard classes and can articulate why is this so important to me? Why is it important to the world or to my community to study this? And what do I want to do with it in the future, right? Colleges are probably going to want that second person, right? Because they want someone who's going to intellectually engage in their classes and their community and their teachers, right? Versus someone who is just going to be, I'm really good at taking tests. Fantastic, right? But is that person going to be a change maker like Jay was talking about earlier? I mean, the colleges can only have so much information to make a decision, right? And honestly, from their perspective, it's probably going to be, well, I think this person who's telling me a really fantastic story about why they care is going to matter more than just the fact that this other person has an IMO medal, right? Does that answer your question? Does that make sense? Anyone else have any questions? I think we're just about out of time, but if anyone else has any questions, no? Okay. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us here today. Your children, I think, are still in the SAT room. I think they should be wrapping up soon, but we will be here to answer any questions, to have one-on-one discussions with you as well, if you'd like, right? Any questions that you might still have on your mind or might come up later. We will be here, and then our other team members, Kieran and Paul, will also be here to answer any questions. So if you do, then please feel free to come up to us or reach out to us later. But thank you so much for joining. I know this is a Sunday and maybe it was a little bit long, but hopefully everyone learned something valuable here, right? And that we all walk away a little bit more knowledgeable, I think, right? Thank you very much. And thank you to the online crowd.